Very pleased to bring up Mark Anderson, who's been our keynote speaker a number of times, and also CEO Pattern Computer, but for the last 20 years has spent an amazing amount of time looking at technology trends. And Mark's made a career of making accurate prediction using pattern discovery techniques. He accurately predicted the global financial collapse of 2007 and 8, as well as the oil price collapse of 2014, 2015. Despite having no formal training in finance or economics. Concurrent with his role, Mark is also the founder and publisher of the weekly SNS Global Report on technology and the global economy, read by technology executives and investors worldwide. He founded a fantastic conference called The Future in Review. It's been very stimulating and thought-provoking. I've had a chance to attend many times. The Economist called it the best technology conference in the world. Mark also has a recent book called The Pattern Future, Finding the World's Great Secrets of Predicting the Future Using Pattern Discovery. Describes how he consistently has made successful predictions across a wide variety of disciplines. And in 2015 at the FIRE conference, hard to believe, 5 years ago, a group of CTOs during the CTO challenge developed a new form of computing using pattern discovery. And that's what led to the development and the founding of Pattern Computer. And very fortunate to be involved at the early stages of some of the seed funding that came in, and very privileged to be able to have an opportunity to support the hopeful significant impact that Pattern Computer and the whole FIRE global SNS community has had as a force for good. So please welcome back up Mark Anderson. Mark's going to go through a little bit of a preview of his predictions and technology trends here over the course of the finishing up this year and into 2021. So Mark, we'll go ahead and bring you back up.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks very much. I appreciate the introduction. And yeah, we're proud at Pattern Computer. We've actually, since you guys and our early investors got involved, I just checked it out. We're 3,500% above the value of the company since we started. So it's been a terrific experience so far. I'd like to do this by focusing on the challenges that are obvious to everybody right now. And those are three, really, in my opinion. And so the first is the pandemic, how to manage all of this stuff and close it down in some way or other. The China model and what's called, Xi Jinping calls his China dream, and what that means for the rest of the world. And then climate change, or more largely the anti-science movement versus those who believe in science and using science as a guide. So if we take those as our initial challenges, and maybe in order, because there are some that are quite nearby, like COVID. So I want to share something that I think is not necessarily obvious to everybody. We're all waiting for the vaccines. There's a lot of misinformation out there. My personal view is that technically we'll have vaccines by the end of the year. They'll be in distribution by the beginning of next year. It'll take quite a while to get certainly equitable distribution, but this will be the beginning of the next step, and that's great. We'll have a number of vaccines that have been through three stages of test, and they'll be distributed, no doubt, both in the emerging world and in the developed world. But I think that both are happening. The distribution lines are already preset to a large degree. It's going to happen. Now, the part that I think people miss is this whole thing about herd immunity, which we'll never probably ever get in the next 10 years. So set your mind on that. We're living with the bug for the next 10 years at least. And that's really important, I think, both psychologically and technically to appreciate. So what's the meaning of vaccines? And this is the part financially that I think people have missed. The meaning to me of the vaccines showing up on scene is that the people who have been vaccinated acquire confidence to go out and work and spend money. That's it. That's simple. It's not because everybody in the world's got a vaccine. It's not because it's not because of how each one works. It's because of what I just said. And that single thing starts in January or February. And for every new person who's got that confidence to go out and go to a restaurant or go to the office, that's going to make a material change. So I believe that's our future in terms of vaccination and COVID. And it has nothing to do with herd immunity or wiping out the bug. Those are, in my personal opinion, idiotic goals. So I think that's good news. Number two, if we look at the global tech war, which is kind of the Chinese tech story, it's a real thing. This split between chips, as an example, and standards is a real thing. There's a reason why it's a schism. It's been created on purpose by both sides, and it's not going away anytime soon, I don't think. Now, this depends on the election, which I'll come to in a minute. But we are facing, as tech people, a very divided world, as you know, whether it's supply chains you want to talk about, or whether it's China's market and what you have to pay in blood and sweat and tears to get into that market, or whether it's your IP and how to protect that IP, and so on. All these issues are core issues in the tech world. And if you're not thinking about them and you're running a company, then you're not doing the service you should be doing to your own people. And then finally, the grid is broken. So we look at climate change. You know, PG&E just this last week, how long were they shut down in Napa? It's crazy. PG&E has no alternative, literally, except to continue to do blackouts in California. And who ever thought we'd get to that step? And it's essentially a climate change story. So it's also a very bad managed company. PG&E will probably go through 5 more bankruptcies before they finish this. But it's tragic. And if you live where they're shutting you down, that's crazy. You shouldn't have to experience, in this day and age, days of darkness because they couldn't figure this out. So that's the world we live in, and those are some of the solutions. I think that I'll come back to some of these, but I think that we're going to have to figure out solutions to each of these 3 things in order to get through. And the good news is we're looking at all of them. These are no longer secrets. They're front and center in everybody's mind. And they've been, whether it's the China issue or the grid, all these things are things we're getting focused upon, and that's great. So as you know, I'm an optimist, and I believe that that's all underway and in the proper order, probably. There's something, I'm gonna go through these pretty quickly, Nathan, just because we don't have a lot of time here. The internet makes us mad. Well, that's interesting. Who thought of that, right? So if you go all the way back to the ARPANET and ScienceNet, and it turns out the most important thing about the internet is it makes us really, really angry. And that's how people sell ads today. So whether you're Rupert Murdoch or Roger Ailes or whoever you are, people who use the net to make money know that the best way to get engagement is through anger. It's not through happiness or hope or something else. It's anger. And so, boy, you know, that's an unfortunate thing. And that's us. We own that, right? That's a human nature thing. So because that's true, it turns out that ads and anger are a pair. And that's a really interesting thing to think about. So it's not obvious because you think that Campbell Soup wants you to like them. So, but the real truth of the matter is that it's only when they meaning ad managers, reach in and are able to get you upset about something, you then bond with what they're messaging to you most strongly. All right, so let's look at the election for a minute. I want to start by saying thanks again for the nice intro. And by the way, Nathan, I have a 100% accurate record on federal elections for presidents. I'm always wrong. I have been wrong every time. And over a beer sometime we can talk about why that is. It's a really interesting question, but it's totally true. So I won't say who I think is going to win, because if I say that, then the other guy will win. I don't want to have that happen. But I will say, if you could hybridize, make a chimera out of this whole thing, I'd say I would take Trump's China work, which is misguided but well intended, and I don't think Joe gets that at all. And I'd take everything else about science and Joe. So if we could make a donkey elephant out of that, we'd be much better off. 5G right now is just about money and phones and marketeers. So if you're a marketeer, you're going to have the time of your life, and it's got nothing to do with tech. But for the next year, 5G, 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 and we'll spend a lot of money on it without quite knowing why, and with not very much change in what we're getting out of it. That'll change 2 or 3 years from now. But in terms of next year, a lot of money changes hands. AT&T will be very happy. And as usual, they'll advertise having 5G without having it. Space, how exciting, right? Commercial space. So the big question, we've written a little bit about this. What's the effect of Starlink? What's the effect of having thousands of commercial satellites instead of tens or ones, thousands of them on 5G and everything else that we do in terms of the internet and communications? Good old Elon is up there make up any number you want to at this point, tens of thousands of satellites into orbit. And I don't think anyone appreciates what that's going to do except Elon. So whether you're in the Army, they want a piece of that, whether you're in anybody, I'm sure the carriers are very, very, very interested to know what role he intends to play in global communications. big tech backlash. So the news destruction is a bad thing. You know, the effect of Google and I think of Facebook has been to actually not just destroy local news, but almost all news. All of our major newspapers are in trouble. And taking news, real news, objective news sources away from human society worldwide is one of the worst things you can do. And replacing it with, you know, the internet that makes you mad. So I hope that, I know that Google's facing this right now in DC. I hope that if nothing else, the leaders of our various countries find a way to stop that. Because we need to have it so that when the New York Times hires a good reporter and pays that reporter, they get money back for the stories that he or she writes. And that's not working out right now. Batteries is the money choke point right now. Batteries, batteries, batteries. And it's been the slowest growing, most frustrating thing. Elon's done a lot to improve the energy behind it and the economics behind it. We know what his goals are in terms of batteries, but I think we're going to see something major come up. There's enough attention now that between solid state batteries and new cathode elements and so forth, I think we're going to see something happen. Maybe it's silicon. You have some friends, Nathan, who are working on that one. Something's got to happen to take this out of the 5% per year improvement world and into the 10x improvement world. And I hope that and think that will happen. Autonomous electric vehicles, also a choke point, in this case for tech. And if you think back to this, now those who read SNS know this already. We think that the Standing Committee of China recognized this years ago, about 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and understood that their Made in China 2025 plan, which is really all of the major techs of the world, all the various sectors of the world, were congregated into one single product called the autonomous electric vehicle. The amount of pressure on that idea and that product right now is hard to define. It's unbelievable. So whether you want to measure it in terms of interest from every car maker in the world, ramping up by multiples year by year right now, or whether you want to talk about the money spent or rebudgeted by Daimler and BMW and China and America, this is a huge thing, and it is a true thing that make up any number you want to. 50 of the major tech sectors that you care about are all involved in owning that market. If you get the winner in that market, you own the whole thing. Let's see. AI, and last and not least, it may be artificial, but it's not intelligent. That's my favorite thing of the week. So people kind of get confused, all this Terminator business and Elon's fear. And it really is find the bone. We're doing really stupid things, but they're important stupid things. But the quality of, if you wanted to call it thinking, there's no thinking going on. So you have to say, there's a bone out there to the system, then it'll go find it for you. That's not very interesting. And people should really get their arms around that, So it's got a problem we call the wall, where there's no longer a return on investment after the first 3 runs. There's a black box problem, which is you can't see how it did what it did. It just predicts what you ask it for. Well, that's not very intellectually stimulating. And it's certainly not important enough for the world we're walking into now. We have a very complex world we're facing, lots of problems. We need to have systems which, if they don't think, at least they're more creative in their approach to how to solve problems. So that's not happening yet, but it will happen. And I think there's a lot of focus on getting beyond neural networks as they are today, and whether they become hybrid neural networks, that's the thing, I think, coming up, or whether they're just a whole new layer of mathematics different from that. That's all right in front of us, and that's going to happen. So I'm probably nearing the end of this, and here's my last idea, Nathan. And I think this is both provocative and true. Here's a question. Do non-pattern chips, so the chips we're using today, AWS, wherever you want to go, Intel, NVIDIA, right? Do non-pattern chips that increase ad sales, they do this by focus, by their ability to focus. Do they also increase social silos and division? And the answer is yes. The same exact tricks that give you the ability to sell more gym shoes through Google or Amazon, provided by the same technology, also creates social division. And I believe that that's something that we have to address as a society. And will be a lot of talk about this, whether this is about inclusion, as you were just discussing, or whether it's about other deep problems in society. Our systems are not currently built to help us, but to harm us. And we need to have our systems flipped so they actually increase positive things for humanity, not decrease them. That's it.